Welcome to The Strength to Bloom, the podcast where we spotlight women who've walked through the fire and came out blooming. I'm your host, Lauren Garcia Marsigliano, a community builder, a mama, and a forever believer in the power of storytelling. Today's guest is someone whose strength quite literally bloomed in the face of a life-altering diagnosis. Meet Victoria Ramirez. She's a breast cancer survivor, founder of My Batta, health equity advocate, and Ms. New Jersey International 2025. At just 31, Victoria discovered a lump in her breast through self-examination and was later diagnosed with stage 2 triple-negative breast cancer, one of the most aggressive forms. What followed was months of chemotherapy, surgery, and healing, both physically and emotionally. Instead of letting this diagnosis define her, Victoria turned her pain into purpose. She founded My Batta, a mastectomy gown brand created to provide comfort, dignity, and style to women navigating recovery. She now uses her voice to advocate for early detection, health equity, and legislative change, all while walking stages with her crown as a symbol of resilience, not perfection. So I want to get into today's story, but hi, Victoria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
I am so happy to have you here. She is actually the Ms. to my Mrs. New Jersey. So let's get into today's story. So can you take us back to the moment where you discovered the lump and what those first few days were like emotionally and mentally?
So just 2 years ago, it was a beautiful summer day like no other. I was going on a walk with my dog and my boyfriend, and I had this romper on. I had a black romper that had a hanger tag out on the side, and it was bothering me. It was rubbing against my arm, and I went to go tuck it in, and that's when I felt a lump. And I don't have any family history, so initially I didn't think anything of it. That was a Sunday night. By Monday, I called my mom first thing in the morning because it had bothered me after feeling something under my skin. It was kind of like a small marble. And I called my mom first thing in the morning. I was like, something isn't right. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know what to do in this situation. And she told me, call your OBGYN. So that's what I did. I was able to get a physical the same day, that Monday, for my OBGYN. And I say it is a miracle because the day that I was diagnosed to the day that I felt the lump was just within 1 week. And it went so fast for me. Monday, I went to my OBGYN. Tuesday, I got the referral for ultrasound and mammogram because my OBGYN confirmed she also felt something. But there was no concerns because I was young, under the age of 40. I didn't have any family history. So possibly it could be a cyst, but they wanted to check it out. They had findings from the ultrasound and mammogram. So Wednesday, the next day, I was able to get a biopsy. And by Friday, I got the call for my diagnosis, stage 2 triple negative breast cancer.
Okay. That's insane. But I'm so happy that luckily it was found pretty quickly and you were proactive about it, because other people may not have, felt something and just said, oh, I'm young. This is not, it's not me, because, those are the thoughts that cross our minds.
Definitely.
But yeah, that's really scary. So triple negative breast cancer is obviously known for being really aggressive and fast moving. So what helped you stay grounded during diagnosis, the treatment, and ultimately like the recovery? Because I know that had to have been really hard.
I think for me was going through the feelings, being scared at first because you don't know what's coming at such an early age in your life, being angry that this is happening to you so early in your life, and feeling those emotions first. And then for me, I think I leaned into faith. Number one, that was for me to lean into community. So my family, my faith, my friends, lean into others when I needed help after feeling all of those emotions and feelings.
Yeah. I'm glad you had a support system, and we'll chat a little bit about that later, because, I think that having that sisterhood and that your family and luckily your boyfriends, like that had to have helped you gather like your emotions together, because it's sometimes hard to be alone with all of that. It could be really detrimental to your mental health.
Definitely.
So I am an entrepreneur. And I think about starting businesses all the time. So I do have to ask, how did the idea for My Batta come to life? And why was it so important for you to create something functional yet empowering for women undergoing mastectomy recovery?
And I think too, going back to the pageant quickly, we connected
Yes.
on this when we first talked, and I told you about what I was doing and you told me about what you were doing, and just feeling that connection through being an entrepreneur is amazing to feel the
Yeah.
empowerment with women.
Kind of
And
knowing like we obviously it's different things, and I think that this is what's so special about Strength to Bloom. Like obviously my story is not your story, but we all have a story to tell. So, and I think that goes both ways, like with this and with business, because whether or not like we're doing the same thing, like I can understand, you know, how you feel about your business. It's your baby, and you want to see it succeed and scale. And I have like those same feelings about my business. And I definitely think like from that conversation that first night at our purple party, I felt so connected with you. We were talking about patents and trademarks and all of the things. And quick fact, she even helped me during rehearsal one day because my husband wasn't there. So she stepped in and helped me through that. And I am just so grateful because it was both of our first times. So it was nice to be able to do that together.
definitely. And coming from that, bringing in cultural aspects too, at least for me, I had talked about being a Latina and what that meant to me, being in a space that was different from me. But going into my recovery, I wanted to be as comfortable as possible. And that for me was going back to my roots. So a bata is a Hispanic nightgown, and that's what I wore during my recovery. But I found that there wasn't anything like that on the market that had the functionality that I needed during my recovery, which was when I had my double mastectomy. I had 4 JP drains. So they were drains coming out of the side that were draining all the fluid after I had the tissue removed. And I found gowns that were long sleeves, thick robes. I had chemo first and then surgery. So I had post chemo hot flashes, and I didn't want anything with
Yeah.
sleeves. I wanted to be as comfortable as possible. And when I thought about being comfortable at home, the first thing that came to mind to me was what my grandmothers wore growing up. They had these long, flowy dresses that were just loose and comfortable, but they also looked beautiful. So I wanted kind of the functionality and also to feel comfortable in my skin. So my bata itself is a part of my roots. It's a part of resilience. It's sleeveless, and it includes functionality at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what women need after going through procedures like this, like I didn't go through what you went through, but let's say a mom recovering postpartum, right? You feel so, you just don't feel like yourself after like these big life altering surgeries, that it also helps to be in something that makes you feel confident and beautiful. So I think that that's also really special, especially for Latinas who can actually make it relate to their cultures. It reminds you of grandma Sunday morning when they're cleaning around the house. So I absolutely love that. So next up, we talked about patents and trademarking at the pageant weekend. So your gown design is patent pending, right? Pending?
Yes.
So I think that's absolutely incredible. Bloom Social Club is trademarked, but a patent I feel like is so special. It's something so different, and I think that's really incredibly thoughtful because not a lot of people think to do things like this to protect your assets, right? So can you walk us through? I think you walked us through what makes My Bata different. But if you were talking to a person who's going through the same recovery you had to go through, what would you say? Like, what would be your selling point? What's your unique selling proposition?
So for me, the patent is something completely different. I have a background in clinical research. I'm a clinical research manager, and I'm always doing research. That's number one. And so when I wanted to make this gown that was sleeveless and had drain pockets, these were something that you could find a gown that has drain pockets, maybe not so much sleeveless. Those are different features. But when I thought of, if I'm creating something different, what else can I add to it? And to me, it was so important to be independent. That was number one. I love to be independent. I want to do things on my own as much as possible. And that's really hard to do during recovery, especially during the first couple of days. Like you mentioned, if you're having childbirth or you're having a major surgery, the first couple of days, you need help. You need assistance, at least going to the restroom. So for me, when I wore my bata to go to the restroom, I struggled with having it up and moving my arms and not being able to soil the gown. So I patent pended these buttons and loops that lift the gown that help with mobility so that your gown stays up while you're using the
Wait,
restroom.
I love that. And I had no idea. We didn't talk about that, but it kind of reminds me of like your wedding gown when you can
Yeah.
pick it up. I love that. And that's, I feel like you thought so outside of the box because like I would not even like I struggled a lot after my two C-sections to go to the bathroom and you're right. Like sometimes I would have to get like I would have to take everything off because I you would soil them, right? That is you're a genius.
And this can be used for any kind of surgeries, not just breast surgeries. So I'm hoping one day for elderly too. If you're thinking about nursing homes and independence, if they're sitting on the restroom, for me, I would have to have someone either standing behind me to hold out my gown while I'm trying to use the bathroom independently. That kind of takes away from your a little bit of your
Dignity.
dignity, right?
Yes.
You're trying to be dignified in an undignified situation. So it's part of the dignity and the independence kind of
I
together.
know. And after like a surgery, I feel like they've seen so much of you already that you're just like, I really need this time by myself to heal in a dignified manner. And I swear, you're a genius because I like those are things that bothered me, but I would have never thought to do things like that. That's incredible. I love that. And that is definitely your unique selling point. So Victoria's also, she does everything, right? She's a researcher. She went through all of this while still creating My Batta, but she's also a legislative ambassador for the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network. So what has advocacy looked like for you on a policy level?
For me, it's using my voice, number one, to be in rooms where policy is being discussed. I think I go back to as a Latina, as a minority, as a young person, we need to be rooms where we can make changes in policy and talk to legislators. We're constituents of where they work and live also, so they should hear about us. At least for me, I had the opportunity in December to go to Trenton to testify on biomarker testing, which at the time was a bill. And I talked about how important it was to accurately diagnose patients to make sure that they have the correct treatment that they have. And from December, I think until last month, the bill is now a law. And so if we continue talking and using our voices and go in front of all of these legislators that get our tax money at the end of the day and tell them, hey, these are things that are happening. How could it be that New Jersey, in I think around all of the states, New York has biomarker testing, Connecticut, I think even Texas had it, where that is included in insurance for them to make sure that they do biomarker testing. That is now a law now in the state of New Jersey that it's required for them to do to have accurate diagnosis.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I think policy change is so important. And I go back to like eighth grade when we're in social studies class, and I remember my teacher saying something along the lines of like, if you want to see change, you have to be the voice to do it. And you're doing just that. And is sad sometimes to see how much, and I'm in the healthcare field, but how much our healthcare system kind of disappoints us with insurances and kind of like the testing and not enough like patient advocacy, even caregiver advocacy. And I'm going through the same thing with like my father and his ALS treatments and the lack thereof and the lack of funding. And so for me, I really like commend you because to go in front of people who sometimes don't even see the rest of us as humans is really hard, and you're really standing up for everybody that has gone through the same thing or will be going through the same thing.
I think too, when people look at us, you could look at people, you don't know what someone's going through. When I got to testify and I'm up there and talking to the legislators, like, why is she here?
Yeah.
What is she doing? When you have a panel of doctors, you have older patients that have been affected, and maybe it may not have affected me, but within my community, it has. I still consider myself a cancer patient, even though I'm in remission. And it doesn't mean that I don't stop using my voice when my treatment ends. It has to continue for others, for our future. So being a part of that, I would have never thought a year out of treatment that I would be in front of legislators and helping to make a bill into a law. But it's possible, but you don't know if you don't try. And that's why I always tell people, use your voice. What do you have to lose? You're just speaking your truth, and hopefully you can make a change by doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, what's the worst that they can say? Like, no? Then you try another door, you know? So I think it's really important that you're doing that and you continue to do so, because like I said, I sometimes get so frustrated, like when I'm trying to help patients and they're slamming doors in their faces, and these are treatments that should be given to us regardless. So I think it's so important, and like you said, these biomarkers can create such a change in their treatment plans that can actually make it more effective. So when you talk about biomarkers, did you have that testing done?
So I did, but I didn't have any genetic markers. I had no family history, no genetic markers. For triple negative, it's not hormone receptive. It's not from progesterone. They always would say to me, the oncologist, you're an anomaly. We don't know why or how this happened. Triple negative usually is a higher diagnosis in minority or women of color, but I still did the biomarker testing to know that if I had other genetic markers, if I would have had genetic markers, then that would have played into how I would have done preserving my fertility, which is something that I did regardless because I was still at a young age. I don't have any children of my own. So I did 2 weeks of fertility preservation before my 5 months of chemo. I had 16 rounds and I wanted to be able to do that if I was able to do it before starting. So my oncologist said, you have 2 weeks before you start treatment. I give you the heads up to do it. And I was so thankful that I was able to do it. I know that not everybody has that same situation, but that gave me the opportunity to see what other factors played into my treatment as well, or surgeries.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's incredible. I see so many women nowadays taking advantage of like egg freezing. Maybe not in the same predicament as you, but I think it's kind of like taking our own health and our own dreams into our own hands, because you just never know what's on the other side of like treatment. And I think it's important because if like being a mom is like a dream of yours, you also need to take the bull by the horns and like do what you can to be able to do that. Was that also hard? Like to do that thinking like, oh, I'm so young, like, and I have to go through all of this. I'm sure that those thoughts running through your head were hard.
Yeah, I think at that time I had been with my boyfriend 2 years. And so when I got diagnosed too, it was a conversation of about, at least for me, I told him, you don't have to be here. We could be friends. You could part ways. We're young. I don't know what this journey might look like for me. And so, we initially were moving into another chapter of our life, or thinking about moving into another chapter of our life before all of this happened. And he was like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be right there with you. So I was so grateful to have him. And he helps me with, I'd had like 5 shots a day for 2 weeks. And I was going
So that
through
was
these
quick.
weird pregnancy symptoms. I was bloated, and he would make food and it smelled bad. And he's like, is this what it's going to be like? But I was able to have a partner to go through it. And for me, I wanted to be able to get through my journey and have something at the end for me if I could. And for us, it was potentially to have a family in the future. So it was difficult, but having a partner by my side
Made all the
really helped.
difference. Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned I'm in healthcare and I work in the pediatric healthcare area, and I've seen how essential advocacy is for healthcare, even in my own journey being diagnosed with lupus and my own journey being a daughter to my father who's fighting ALS. What advice would you give someone who's just starting their journey and may feel like super overwhelmed?
I think you don't have to be strong all the time. That was for me. I always go back to the independent part. Like, you always have to do a million things. You always have to wear 100 hats. And I couldn't do that. Cancer is unpredictable. You don't know when or why. And sometimes you just have to relinquish and say, okay, I need to take things day by day. And you don't have to be strong all the time. You don't. It's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel all the feels, but when you go through those emotions and you need help, it's okay to also reach out. It's okay to say, like, hey, for me, at least within the breast community, we call them breasties. And there's so many people on social media that I had reached out to, or even commenting, that reached out to me after I shared my journey and say, I'm going through these symptoms, and what do you think? Or what have you gone through? And the tips and tricks, or finding a mentor, or for me, talking to a chaplain to talk about my faith. There were so many resources out there. So,
Don't do it alone. Find your village.
yeah, accessing those resources, you have to find them,
Yeah.
which sometimes could be very difficult if you don't have all the things, or, sometimes it can be overwhelming too. The social worker just like, here's an email or here's a pamphlet of all the things. And you're just like, but start small, take it day by day. And it's okay to not be strong all the
Yeah,
time.
absolutely. I concur. I think that's super important. And I think as Latina women, we tend to try and take on everything. And I remember like hiding in my story for such a long time and feeling very alone in the journey, even when I had my husband and my mom. And because I was just trying to pretend that I was okay for everyone else. But in turn, like I wasn't thinking of myself. And it wasn't until I feel like I had kids where I was like, there's just no way that I could be a good mom if like I am not like okay mentally. And it came into play. Like there was no way I could be a good wife or a good daughter because I was trying to take care of everybody else and not myself. So it wasn't until like I had that, like it came to me all of a sudden and I was like, I need to find people who understand and educate myself. It was honestly, I'm still learning about the resources that like ALS patients and caregivers have, but there are so many. And I'm sure there's so many like with breast cancer, there's so many resources that are out there that do support groups and they're virtual. They have support groups for the patients, support groups for the caregivers, support groups for daughters and like sons. So I think it was so important for me to kind of like step out of my shell and realize that like I need to also take care of myself and find those people that can kind of guide me through this. So I like that you mentioned like finding a mentor too, like somebody that
Yeah,
went through it and
definitely.
kind of had those resources too that can kind of point you in the right direction because it is hard when people are throwing all of these things at you after receiving a diagnosis like as extreme as something that's so aggressive and can really not have the greatest outcome too.
Yeah. I think for me, I initially too wasn't going to share my story. I was embarrassed. I felt like at my age, everyone's getting married, having kids. And I thought that I was doing everything correctly. I'd gone to school, I got my master's, I had my job, my professional career, I had bought my townhouse, I was with my partner, we were talking about our next steps in life, and I was embarrassed. And I remember my my breastie now, Crystal, and telling her, she's like, I was asking her questions and she's like, I don't see anything online for you talking about this. And I was like, I'm embarrassed. I don't want to share it. I don't feel like I have anything to offer other people. I feel like my life is not where everybody else's life is. And she was like, but you can help others. She's like, just how you reached out to me, I'm sure others. And I was like, no, nobody's going to reach out to me. Nobody's going to talk to me or want to do these things. And then once I started sharing my story, then I started connecting with other people. And now there's just so many women under the age of 40 are going through the same thing now that cancer rates, unfortunately, are increasing. But they also are going through the same thing at the same time. And everybody's journey might look different. Everybody's story might look different. I have friends that have kids. I have friends that are in their 20s and that have been diagnosed. And so if we could all come together, I got so many tips and tricks about symptoms. I learned about so many of these resources through them that I didn't even hear myself.
Yeah.
And the mentor part too, like having someone that's on the other side of what you've gone through and being able to talk to them, or where you want to be in life, is so comforting, to be able to say like, okay, this is where I feel like my life can be or can do it. And they're living, they're thriving. And that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. And I think I think it's important to find people who are kind of going through similar journeys too, because a doctor is great and I feel like you should connect with your doctor and feel comfortable with them, but they also are not going through what you're going through. They haven't experienced this. So to know someone and to be able to kind of reach out when you're not feeling well and you have these symptoms and be like, "Hey, like have you felt these?" Because sometimes the
Mm-hmm.
symptoms that we feel aren't always the textbook symptom.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's important to have somebody who can be like, yeah, this is what I felt. And so you feel like you're not going crazy either.
The doctors would be like, "Oh, you shouldn't feel this," or like, "It shouldn't hurt." I think I was having this conversation the other day with someone, and they were talking about their ports where they have access to draw blood or get treatment. And a lot of us, which they would say, you shouldn't have pain when they're putting the catheter in, when they're doing the surgery. Most of the times you're awake. And the doctor's like, "You shouldn't have pain. Have you had this surgery, sir or ma'am?
Yeah.
Do you know
Yeah.
you shouldn't?" And then like it hurts. It sometimes it does hurt. And so going into it with the mentality of, okay, this is what it could be, this is what it can't be, having at least different options of like, all right, I'm prepared mentally for the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. At least I know. But it can't be just all like, oh, everything is fine, because sometimes
It's
it's
not.
not.
Yeah. I think that's really important. So you're now Miss New Jersey International 2025. How are you going to use your title to uplift and inspire others? And how does it tie into your cancer journey?
So for me, I focus on survivorship and what life looks like after cancer, 30s. And number one for me is early detection. I always say I didn't have family history. I didn't have any genetic markers. And that romper, I always say the romper that saved my life, if that romper wouldn't have bothered me that day, I don't know when I would have found it, because I wasn't at the age of mammograms since I didn't have any family history. And typically I didn't do self exams that often as I probably should have. I was on top of my which I had gone in December, and I felt the lump in June. So for me, I was stage 2 because of the size of the tumor. And then they have grades 1 through 3. Grades means how fast it grows. And for me, it was grade 3, which means the fastest growing. So from December to June, it could have grown to the 2 centimeters that it was. And if I would have waited till the next December to get my physical without having touched myself, I don't know that I would have been stage 2, stage 3, or possibly stage 4.
Yeah.
So for me, it's promoting knowing your body, feeling yourself, doing self exams no matter what age. If you're in the shower, you can feel around to see if you see any abnormalities. Know your body, because how else would you know if something is wrong? If you are lotioning yourself, just feel yourself. It might sound funny, but touch yourself, feel yourself, be in tune with your body. That's everything that I promote, because early detection for me is what I believe saved my life.
No, I think that's really important. And when I'm doing like physicals, especially with the boys find I'm young, and I'm a girl. So they feel sometimes uncomfortable when I'm doing their physicals. But, it is important for them to know that there is a high rate of testicular cancer in boys their age, along with hernias, testicular torsion. So it is important for me to do those exams yearly just to make sure that everything is okay. So I try to explain that to them before I do anything. And then I tell the girls too, like, I know that you may feel young, but as soon as you get your period, you should be taking care of yourself. So I think it's important to teach kids young, because I don't think that I was taught to do those things growing up. I went to a Catholic school all my life, and it wasn't things that were like spoken about, and it wasn't things that my pediatrician spoke to me about. So I do agree that I've been seeing a lot of cases younger and younger and younger, and it is very scary. So I think education and prevention should be number one, especially in the medical field. And I hope that other doctors are doing the same thing with their patients and making sure that they know how to do a breast exam.
I remember at the pageant when I was leaving, I was talking to someone there, and she was like, "Did you win?" I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, What did you win? Like, what was your, like, what did you talk about?" And then I told her, I shared my story with her, and she had told me, "That's so interesting. How did you find out?" I go, "Well, just touching myself. I just felt it by touching myself." And she shared with me that her mom and her aunt were also breast cancer survivors. and that she was under the age of 40 and she never thought about doing any
Yep.
exams.
And I think
And
that's
he told me too that the hard part, I think, with some people is insurance. And they think that without insurance, you can't get these screenings. And something that I always share, there's so many resources online. There are so many free clinics out there for anyone to have, whether you're a man and you're getting screenings, or a woman, anybody can get these screenings. There's so many mobile clinics. There's so many hospitals that do free screenings all around the year around. So
there's just so much out there that I wish was talked about more, or or if it is talked about, it's put in front of people who actually need it. So I think it is important, and I think everybody should take advantage of the resources, but educate yourselves. Like, go online, like the resources are there. I'm not a fan of like Google and searching your symptoms, but I
no.
do think that there's a bunch of evidence-based practice online that is really helpful, and there are websites that do take evidence-based practice, and it's on the website.
No, for the resources. It's for the resources to get the help.
Yes.
And I think also too, something that we don't talk about is that the stigma you had mentioned about going to Catholic school. I also went to Catholic school, but the stigma about if nothing's wrong, then why should I? And that mentality of if nothing's wrong, then why should I go? Why should I check this out? For me, my blood work was, when I was diagnosed, my blood work was perfect. I had an isolated tumor. And if I would have just ignored this small little tiny marble under my skin and just let it grow, it would have become something worse. So the stigma of, oh, if, I'm not on the floor or I can't get out of bed, then I should go to the doctor. Why wait until then? That's why early detection and prevention is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. I that's a stigma that I'm hoping starts to, like, we're taking away that generational trauma of like going to therapy and like doing all these things that people are like, well, you don't need that. I think it's important for us, our generation, to be able to say like, no, these things are here for a reason. And it's important to put yourself out there, and really prevention is super important. It's the first thing that we learn about in medical school. Like, prevention is the first step. So going to like these fairs and connecting with your local hospital. So there are people that are trying to do good, and that are helping other people who are going through hard times. So I think it's really important, and I'm glad that you're using your voice to be able to share those for your breasties. So I think one of the main things that I think all women struggle with, but especially going after a surgical procedure such as a double mastectomy, women struggle with that body image. So how do you think that you rebuilt your confidence, like post cancer, post surgery, and what would you say with women who have gone through it and are still struggling to see their beauty?
I think rebuilding confidence is a process. It's not a solution.
Yeah.
It's a constant. Right? I think as women, we're always trying to see how we could make ourselves look better. What a typical woman should look like? What is beauty? And for me, I always have this little slogan like, beauty is strength and strength is beauty. And for me, it was about being strong, being alive, and surviving, number one. And living with scars and having my body change completely at my young age was very difficult for me in the beginning because I didn't have anybody that I could really lean into and talk to about that, knowing a personal connection other than online and other people. And that's something very sensitive to share. It's a surgery that I consider to be an amputation. And I think a lot of people within the community would agree. Sometimes you lose loss of sensation since they're taking a lot of your nerves out. You don't have a lot of feel there. How it looks could be completely different. And so confidence, I think, is a process, and knowing who you are on the inside and that you have been through maybe one of the hardest things in your life, and being confident that, you're loved, you're supported, and you're still alive. And that might be hard to say for other people that are actively going through treatment, or other people that are stage 4, but I still struggle sometimes. And I think that's part of why I went into the pageant. I always say, like, I don't think I would have done the pageant if I didn't have cancer. And for me, it was building my confidence. And out of that, within a year of recovery, I told myself, I'm going to make myself uncomfortable and join a pageant and see how that makes me feel, because this is what cancer could look like afterwards. This is what cancer looks like after what I've just been through. I lost my hair. I lost my lashes. I had so much steroids. I had gained about 20
Whew,
pounds.
that is
And every time I would look in the mirror, I would be so upset who I was. But I would also have to give myself grace. And I lean into gratitude for being alive, being able to receive treatment when some people can't. Some people can't afford treatment. Some people don't have access to the best treatment. Some people don't have access to technology like we do over here. I was very grateful to go to MSK and have the best doctors and the best treatment and technology able. So for me, at least, it was leaning into gratitude and taking it day by day. And part of that was rebuilding my confidence and throwing a wig on when I need to. I still love my wigs, and I wear them with confidence. And that's what helped me, finding the things that make you feel confidence, whether it's stamping on eyebrows, whatever during that time. It's a journey that you take, and that's why I say it's a process, because I still struggle with it sometimes day to day. I have scars all over my body, and it's a part of my journey, and those are my battle scars for me.
I feel like you're the true definition of strength to bloom. And you mentioned like strength throughout the whole thing. So I absolutely love that. I think that is really hard. I remember going through my treatment and I was on like 80 milligrams of prednisone for about like 4 or 5 months. The prednisone blew up my face. I had the buffalo hump. And I remember every time my husband, well, he was my boyfriend at the time, whenever he wanted to like go out and go to dinner, hang out with our friends, I would look at myself in the mirror after getting ready and I would be like, I don't want to go. I don't feel like myself. I don't look like myself. And it was such a point where I didn't want to get out of bed for a really long time. I was so depressed. And then finally, I was like, this is just who I am. This is just a part of the process. And being in the medical field, like I knew like after I got off the prednisone, like that swelling would eventually go down and all that stuff. But when you're in that moment, like you don't seem to see like that finish line. And so I definitely applaud anybody going through this and keeping such a positive mindset. And I do think it's a lot of like that mindset, like giving yourself affirmations, just kind of hearing that and telling yourself those things, I think are really important. And they make I wouldn't say they make all the difference, but they make like little impacts on your day, which those little impacts then have a bigger impact. So I can't believe that we have to go through these struggles, like even at such a young age, even older. But like that's what life and that's what the strength to bloom is all about, is like celebrating those victories and those successes and just coming out at the end of it all still blooming and helping other people do the same.
Yeah, it's pushing through those hard times.
Yeah.
It's really just pushing through and finding the strength to push through, because sometimes we have to find it, and whatever means it is to find it, whether it's throwing on a pink shirt or wearing something funny, or I don't know. I did the funniest things for Halloween. I had my dog and I dressed him up as Mini Me, and I was Dr. Evil. And I was like, when else am I going to be bald?
Yes.
When else am I going to be
Wait, that
bald
is
and be able to wear a band? And I just made fun out of it. I thought it was so much fun to just do something or take pictures. I have the pictures with the flowers, and I'm bald.
I
And
love
I
those.
put on lashes, and you know what? I tried to embrace the moment and just feel all the
Yeah.
feels.
I think that's super, super important because sometimes we get stuck in those stages of life instead of like looking forward and seeing like all that you've been able to go through and still be the person that you are, like deep down inside. You went back to a quote, and I go back to this quote all the time, like sometimes the things that bury you are really the soil in which you bloom. And I go back to that quote all the time because obviously, like, flowers need to be planted down. They're in darkness, in silence, and it takes water, it takes sunlight, it takes the environment to help you grow out of it. So community is obviously such a powerful theme in a lot of our journeys, right? So from care teams to advocacy to sisterhood to your breasties, how has community played an important role in your
For me, I think healing takes a village. It honestly does. When I think about the darkest times, like right after my surgery or when I had the bandages or I first looked at my scars freshly and the new version of me, the new body of myself, it was hard because I didn't feel like I loved myself during these times. And I really struggled with my self image and how could I love myself? Or how could I love somebody else if I didn't love myself? And just being surrounded by love and positivity and having the people championing me no matter what, because it's who I am on the inside that truly matters. That really, for me, and having a village just supporting me and championing me really helped me get through it.
Yeah. And I think for other people who may not have like family members and or like a loved one or a spouse, like partner, that to go through these things with them, I think creating your own village and finding those people that, I have to say, like, going through hard times really weeds out the people who are not really, on your side or who want to see you bloom. So that was really important for me, and I'm thankful for that. But I do think I went out of my way to find those people for me because you need that. I don't think that I would have survived these things if I didn't have a person that I could say, hey, can we go grab a coffee? I don't want to talk about anything. I just want to grab a coffee with somebody and we can listen to each other breathe. But I just need that moment of like clarity. Actually, I wasn't going to go back to work after my son, and I chose to go back to work because it was the only thing that kept my mind off of like what was going on. And I made work friends, and just being able to put a smile on a family's face and like listen and be that sense of support for them, like really truly helped me heal. And like you said, this year specifically, I told myself like I need to do things that make me uncomfortable, because if I don't, like I think I'm going to stay in this season of life. I felt so stuck. And doing this, I didn't really go in with the intention of like, I'm definitely going to win. I just went in with like, I want to meet new people, people that are kind of in the same position as me. And luck have it, I met Victoria. But it was such an eye opener that even going through all of this, like we can use this platform to really speak out about the things that are super important to us. So I built that community too, which is really special. So looking back now, what's one message that you wish you could give to yourself on that day that you received your diagnosis?
For me, I think it would be you don't have everything figured out in life, and that's okay. I laugh because before everything, I was like, I have my 5-year plan. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to, by this age, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Once I got diagnosed, everything was out of the window because I didn't know what came next. Had no idea. And I still live in that now. I may be in remission, but I don't know what's coming next. And I'm okay with that. I'm in a place to say that I'm okay. And I never was before. I always had a plan of what's going to happen, what's going to be next. And I'm still a planner, but I may plan for plan A, plan B. I plan for different things, and that's okay. But just taking it step by step, I think I needed to give myself some grace because I was just so angry. Like, well, how am I now going to do this? How am I going to go on vacation? COVID's over. I'm supposed to be traveling. And it's like, no, girl, you're supposed to be living and get treated. Focus on that first, get better, and then we could do the next step. So it's for me, like taking a step back, you can't control everything. I wanted to have control of my life, and cancer showed me there's no controlling.
No.
You can't control cancer.
Yeah.
You can't control illnesses that just come up. What you can control is your mentality and how you navigate those things. Those you can have control of, but you can't control everything else around you. That's just life itself.
Yeah. And it's hard to come to terms with that. It really is. I'm definitely a control freak, and I go crazy when there's things that are not in my control and like I have to leave it to other people to do. So I can definitely see where that's like really hard. But if there's anything that I've learned is like life is really short and you just like never know what's, around the corner. So just like living in the moment and really being present. I think that that's one thing that this year I decided that I was going to do more. And I just want to be able to experience every little moment, like the good, the bad, the ugly, because like, like one day you're fine and you're walking your dog, and the next you're starting treatment for something you did not have in your plan.
Yeah. And I have friends that I've lost that started treatment the same time as me have probably ended treatment before. I've had friends that are my age. I've had friends that are younger than my age that have gone into remission and then have been diagnosed again. So I try to live my life as same thing day to day. And after work, I still work full time. I still run my business and do 100 other million things, but time for myself and time for my family. My relationship with my family is so much different now. Telling people that you love them and doing those things, you don't know what's promised tomorrow, whether it's sickness or something. Things happen. And so living day by day and just enjoying and loving those around you, whether it's your friends or your family. Like I'm always texting, calling, and I could always do more. I feel like I could always do more, and there's always more that I could do. But at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, I feel like I did enough of what I could do. Then that's also, I feel like I have this different mindset on life and what life should be. I'm like, why not? Why can't I? Why can't I do these things? Why can't I spend more time with my family? Why can't I go on these trips and do these things? Because what's stopping me?
Yeah, absolutely. I was with the girls yesterday, and was going through like imposter syndrome of certain things. And I was, sometimes I'm like, why me? And Mrs. New York was like, well, why not you?
Yeah.
And that to me was, yeah, you're right. Why not me? And I think that everybody should kind of go into certain things with that mentality. It may not go the way you want it to go, but seriously, why not you? Why can't you do these things? So I want to know, what does the strength to bloom mean to you personally? And I feel like you covered this a little bit, but
I think you mentioned talking about how it's about growing. For me, there could be growth in darkness, and that's where I feel like you had mentioned I use my pain into purpose. I didn't know what during the time when I was going through treatment and doctors telling me you're an anomaly, we don't know why or how this happened. I was like, that's not good enough. That is not good enough for me, and I can't just go back to my life normal. I can't just go back to my day to day doing, okay, my 9 to 5, family, friends, marriage, blah blah. No, that's not good enough for me. So I needed to take my pain into purpose. And I feel like I put all the things together. I was growing. I want to say for me, the strength of bloom is like growing through the darkness. You come out on the other side. The light is where you come out, and that's where you see things differently. And that's where I was able, I think it started, I want to say, when I created My Batta and I was in my surgery and I felt like, okay, this is like almost the last step of
you
my
were starting to see the
survivorship
light at the end of
journey.
the tunnel.
Yeah. Then I was like, all right, I have this renewal on life. Like I'm reborn again, I guess I want to say. I felt like I had this new purpose to life. And it's like, okay, I just faced the scariest thing that I could have ever faced. How am I going to come out from this on the other side? And I feel like all the things that I'm working on, and I want to do so much more, and there's only so much that I could do. And I have to give myself grace too
Yeah.
sometimes. But blooming and becoming the person that I am today, I was that person, and maybe I held back a little bit, and I always had that, but I felt like I didn't have the purpose. And once I was like, okay, there has to be more advocacy. There has to be more to all of these things. I felt like the light for me was like, I can't just go on life like everything is okay,
Yeah.
because it's not.
It's not. Yeah.
And I need to use my voice to do it. I have a very loud voice. I'm Puerto Rican and Dominican, so what other way than talking to people and sharing my story and advocating and sharing my story for others that can't. My friend Amanda, she was an amazing advocate. She was a journalist, and I met her through an event, and we shared our struggles. And unfortunately, she fought her battle. And my promise was to always talk about her and share her story, that a beautiful 32-year-old woman faced and fought hard, but there's not enough. We need more clinical trials for stage 4. We need to find a cure to cancer and all of these things. Just because I'm not on active treatment doesn't mean that my fight doesn't end.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I don't think it should ever end. Like that will always be a part of your story. And I think that people who advocate, and I think even family members of people who have gone through this, and even if they're still alive today, I think they should take it upon themselves too. We all have to play some part of history, right? And I think that we all were given voices If we want to see the change, we have to be the ones to like go out there and make it happen. I definitely think like my dad lost his voice, right, throughout this whole thing. He still has his computer, he communicates with us. But if there is one thing that I'm going to do is advocate for my father and make sure that his legacy never dies. And if that means that I have to shout from the rooftops that ALS needs more funding, more treatment, I mean, there's nothing. And this has been around for so long and it's terminal. Like there's nothing. There's things that stop the advancement by 2 or 3 months. Like that is not enough. I think even caregivers of people who have gone through cancer or spouses that have lost their partners because of it, they also need to stand up and use their voice. And they're only going to do it if they see people like you and me doing it and feeling that comfort within us and our stories. So that is why I think hopefully the Strength to Bloom will help people realize that there is a platform for their voice, for their story, whether or not it's the same one that I share. So I'm so happy to be able to do this and have some sort of platform that I can be able to share these stories, because educating other people to be able to use their voice, I think is going to make a big change for all of us.
Yeah. And I think too, you share your story so beautifully. When I talk to my mom about being a caretaker too, the dynamic of taking care of a child too, right? This is a mom taking care of her adult daughter, and the resources. And like you had mentioned earlier, doctors can only say so much, but they haven't really experienced those things, whether it's the treatment for your dad or, just all of these communities, having those communities for caretaker resources themselves too, because there's so many things that my partner, my boyfriend, and my mom needed resources for themselves too, because that in themselves, there's so much around mentally,
The
emotionally that
possibility
you
of
go through.
technically losing you.
Yeah.
Like you were lucky you came out on the other side. I mean, you're still in remission. There's always those what ifs, but it could have played out very differently. And they had to go through those emotions too. And that's why I love that for me, like the ALS United, they have support groups for caretakers. And there's this one company, it's called Synapticare, was started by an ALS patient. One of my dad's nurses, her two sons passed away from ALS. So it is nice. I mean, obviously the stories are super unfortunate. It's such a horrible disease. It's such a horrible thing that we have to even go through these things. But it was so nice to be able to speak to her because she understood what we were feeling in specific moments. And I think that that's important, to find people like that are in your corner, that understand even if they were not the person in your shoes.
Yeah, because they can understand, they're compassionate, they have empathy for what you're going through, and that's different than having just a patient centric. You're not just looking at numbers, you're not just looking at people, you're understanding these
Yeah.
feelings because you've seen it
Yeah.
firsthand.
And obviously I don't wish this, like I tell my mom all the time, like I don't wish like a diagnosis like this upon anyone, because it's truly like heartbreaking watching like life get sucked out of somebody you care so much about. But it does happen, right? And it's important to kind of be in those groups with people who understand you. And I think it's important to also see that for you, like your mom and your boyfriend could talk to each other, but they were coming at it from different standpoints. And that's the way I feel about my mom. Me and my mom are super close. I'm an only child. But
Me too.
yeah, sometimes it's hard to speak to her about the feelings that I feel, because she's coming at it from a wife standpoint and I'm coming at it from a daughter standpoint. I know at the end of the day, when something happens to my dad, she's eventually going to be like alone in that house, right? And for me, like I still have like my family and my husband to go back to. And so sometimes it's hard for me to kind of like have those one-on-one talks with her, because I also need to understand that she is his wife and it's just different feelings. So I understand, like for your mom, like she needs to have that support from moms that have taken care of daughters with breast cancer, and your boyfriend needs to have the spouses. So it also is important to kind of find your people.
And the nurse role
Yeah.
too. I'm sure you are in charge of the medical part. My mom kind of did that part for me. My boyfriend was like the caretaker part on the lean back, but my mom's like talking about, okay, what surgery, helping me with my drains. And I'm sure for you too, it's about navigating the medical system is hard already on its own, even if you're in the
Yeah.
medical system. My mom has a healthcare background, and I know questions too. I'm the patient that asks a
Yeah.
million
The
questions, and
fights
I'm
with
sure you do the same for
insurances.
your dad
Yeah.
too.
The fights with
You always ask those
insurances, it's
questions, but
like,
having that hat on too to ask medical terminology is like kind of going into like, all right, I need to put my medical hat on and kind of take away from the daughter hat, because, or like same for my mom, or I need to go into the medical part now and be serious on like what treatment, what's this, what's next, asking all these questions.
yeah, it is hard, but sometimes like when like for certain, like I was in the ICU one day and like the doctors came in and were like, "Well, aren't you in the medical field?" Like kind of treating me like I should know, and well, this is my father and my hat is off. Like I this is my daughter hat and I need you to talk to me in layman's terms. What is going on? What is the plan of care? Like what are the plans, you know? I was definitely like as soon as I walked into the floor, like I know people were like she's here. Because the things that I went through with my father, he went into the hospital one day, stomach pains, like a lot of abdominal pain. They sent him home and we took him back the next day. And I fought for him to get more treatment because my dad is very good with knowing when he's off and when he's not. I fought for him to get like more tests done. They admitted him with pneumonia. They did blood work and one of his results, his D dimer was super elevated. And I was like, well, are we going to test this? And the resident told me it is probably because of his pneumonia. And I told him, well, I don't care what you think, it could be because I want this testing done. And it turned out that he had bilateral DVTs and a pulmonary embolism. And if I did not fight for him, that would have taken him probably that night. And that's why sometimes whenever I see somebody, especially a Hispanic person, because that's the community that I live in, not understanding when a doctor is talking to them, I try my hardest to be able to step in whenever I can, as long as the family is okay with it, because they don't explain things.
That's why patient advocates are so important, whether it's for the patient, for the family, patient advocates, not just advocating legislation or policies, but advocating for the patient from a medical standpoint is so important.
Yeah, it is, because I've seen my fair share of like people not really understanding what's going on and they're just like moving on. And I'm like, no, you can't do that. Some people unfortunately are not as educated as other people. I've had patients who don't read, who can't write, you know, and we're handing them all of these papers and I'm like, she's going to go home and throw these out and still not understand what's going on. So it's just like really important. And that's what I love about my job is that we make sure to ask them questions. And it's at every visit. Do you have enough money to feed yourselves for a week? Do you know how to read? Do you know where to find resources? Like these are questions that we are mandated by the state to ask. And I think that's so important because you just, like you said, you never know what people are going through. You know, you never know what happens when they leave the doors of our clinic. So my last question for you, and this is because I'm an entrepreneur, but what's the next step for you and for My Batta?
So for my Batta this summer, I'm really excited because we're launching a new colored gown. So I started with the pink because that's homage. That's an ode. Let's say that's an ode to breast cancer awareness, and starting with the pink, I wanted to start with that color. But this summer, I'm launching a new color, so I'm really excited to share that. And I'm going to start rebranding. I want to focus on the advocacy part. I want to focus on the storytelling behind the gown, the cultural aspect, the story behind the warriors that have worn the gown. I've had so many warriors that have amazing stories to tell. So that's going to be part of my rebranding and branching out the community. So I'm really excited for that. And for me,
Okay, I
I'm going to
love that.
continue
You need help?
advocating. Yes, yes, yes. No, I definitely need some ideas. So we'll definitely be
Yeah.
talking about that, because that's not my hat. I could only do so many things. I could do medical research, clinical research. I can share my story. I can advocate. I feel like I'm good at those. But being an entrepreneur, you know that you need to be a marketer, a salesperson. You need
All of it.
to do all those things. Your assistant, your intern, you're all everything.
Yeah.
You're the IT. You're everything. So it's a learning curve, and it's just a process for me. But expanding the community with survivors and thrivers, warriors that are going through it, and continuing to expand that community. But I think for me overall is just continue using my voice. If I was able within a year to help make a bill into a law, I can only imagine what year 2, 3 will be. And within that year, also be Ms. New Jersey. Give myself enough credit for all of those things just within a year's time. So I'm really excited for everything else that's to come, and hopefully do some events with you.
Yes, absolutely. I am just so happy that, and that's what I mentioned this in my first episode, but the pageant truly opened my eyes to the fact that like I am Lauren Garcia. Like I'm not just like a mom or an entrepreneur or like a nurse practitioner. Like I am me. And it opened up so many opportunities and so many friendships that I'm so happy about, because it means that we get to do things like this, right? And really share our stories and put ourselves out there for other people to also feel comfortable to do the same. And if we can just help like one person, if one person can say like, I watched this episode and it meant something to me, or it's helping me kind of cope with whatever I'm going through, then I feel we have done our job. It is so special for me every time somebody says like, you helped me even though you probably have no idea who I am. I've done it with Bloom Social Club and helping women with their businesses, and I'm hoping to do it by sharing my story, because like we both talked about, it is really scary to put yourself out there. I remember thinking to myself, I cannot share this. It took me a really long time, and I feel I did learn who was here for me, but I also pushed people away, people who actually wanted to be helpful. And it took me a long time to receive that help. And I think that it kind of was detrimental. That year was super hard. And I just feel I don't want other people to go through that. And so if us being, Mrs. New Jersey kind of helps that, I think it's so powerful in and of itself, because we got on stage, we did our walk, we got glammed up and all of the things, but it's just so much more than that. I love this pageantry because it allows us to have a platform, and I don't think a lot of other pageant systems have you do that. You can have something that you're passionate about, but this one, like, a big portion of our weekend was interview, and that it's about your platforms and about who you are authentically as a person. So I'm so glad that we got to do that together. Our first time Latinas, like up on that stage. And then I hear your name get called, and I was just so happy, because the whole weekend I felt like we connected, and I just like, you were so genuine, so authentic, and your story was so powerful. I remember you telling me like you were wearing a wig, and I was like, I cannot believe that somebody who has gone through so much has been able to put all of that aside and do something for herself. It takes a really strong person to do that. And so I was just so in awe of everything that you did that weekend. I know that neither of us were expecting it, but I just feel like it was so special to be able to have that. And, since we're both New Jersey, I think it's special that we get
And
that together.
Latinas too, like at the same time, and our first time, I think too, like not giving, I don't know if I gave myself enough credit, but like you said, we're human. At the end of the day, we're human. We're people just like anybody else. We have our professional careers, our businesses, but we're focusing on advocating and using our voice. And that's what drew me into it, because I was like, oh, I love the glitz and glam part. I love the makeup. I love the hair. I love the dresses, all those things, but I didn't have any experience in it. That's why like I'm part of like, I'm okay. I don't need to go to nationals. I did what I came to do, so I'm good. But the experience and getting these connections is definitely number one for me. I've expanded my community now. It's not just the breasties. Now it's the
Yeah.
queens. So being part of the queens to me is just being amazing, because everyone has been supportive through anything and everything that I'm doing. Everyone is always sharing and commenting and
Yeah.
just reaching out, and it's a genuine connection. It's not fake. Like everybody is truly genuinely happy for everything, because we can all win. I think one of the things with women, we could all win and we could all succeed in life, and no matter what we do, and we should always continue to champion ourselves as women.
Yeah. I think that is such a good point, because I think the motto of like the strength to bloom is like truly when one woman blooms, it's like she's planting the seeds for 1,000 more. So I truly do believe that. And just seeing all the women there, like they were genuinely supportive of like all the winners. Everybody was just so happy. Like they were genuine. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today, for being able to come on here and share your story so boldly, I would like to say, because I would like you to tell everybody where they can find you if they want to chat, if they have any questions, if they just want to follow you along on your journey. Where can they find you?
On social media, I have YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. I'm at Boldly Victoria with 2 A's at the end.
Perfect. So I just want to say that you are truly like a beautiful example of the strength to bloom, because despite like everything that you've gone through, you truly found a way to turn your pain into purpose and to truly bloom into everything that you're doing. Obviously, to anybody that's listening or watching, whether you're in the thick of your own storm, your own darkness, or walking along someone who is, because you can always be in that caregiver position. I hope that this story, Victoria's journey, reminded you that even through like our darkest chapters, we still truly do have the power to bloom, the strength to bloom. So thank you again, Victoria. And until next time, everybody stay strong, stay grounded, and keep blooming.